Well, good morning, friends. Welcome to Wake Up in the Word. Hey, thanks for joining me on October the 31st, 2023. For those of you who know me well, you know it's my birthday. And last night we had the privilege of being at Matt and Libby's house and received some gifts from all our children and grandchildren and had a great time with a fantastic meal. And I could give you a lot of good details, but just suffice it to say I've felt really appreciated, and especially from Sue as well, even this morning. So thank you again, Lord, for making it another time around the sun. Birthdays are a good celebration for that. And there are a number of you out there, some of us who have this common birthday, hat falling on Halloween of all things, October 31st. We're a special lot, aren't we? And so happy birthday especially to Tammy Wright Shreve this morning and others who have the distinction of being, as I'm sometimes called, a boo baby. Well, forget all those references. Let's get down to some real horror. A lot of folks have fun with fantasy on this particular holiday, and you can do what you will with that. I don't think we need to celebrate evil and demonic things. But everybody knows when you see little children running up and down your street dressed in costumes that of course, it's not a reality. It's a fantasy. Well, some folks ask about this passage we're reading in Revelation. Could this just be fantasy? And believe it or not, there are some folks who write from an idealist or a preterist perspective that say, you've got to take fantasy into account here. Why, my goodness, you've got guys like C.S. Lewis who wrote great fantasy accounts with Christian principles in them. No one thinks Narnia really exists, but yet it teaches some valuable lessons. Well, friends, I'm here to tell you I do not believe the book of Revelation is about fantasy, nor do I think we're looking at Narnia or some other fantasy situation here. Sometimes when we see things that are laid out in science fiction or fantasy in one generation, they imagine things that perhaps could happen, and in subsequent generations we see those things come to pass. Well, what John saw was far in advance of his day. No, I don't believe, as we talked about earlier in chapter 9, that these were literal locusts. No, I think John is trying to describe things he saw in the language of a first century man, and that's the best imagery he could come up with. We're about to have another one of those sections. So as we wrapped up yesterday, we saw that there was an army of 200 million men, probably combined from many nations. But we have that capacity today, which was impossible in John's day. And as John, in a astounding manner, says, look, I heard their number, just in case you think I wrote this down wrong. Actually, 200 million will be fighting. And then he picks up in verse 17, where we are this morning, where he says, this is how I saw the horses in my vision. The horsemen had breastplates that were fiery red, hyacinth blue, and sulfur yellow. The heads of the horses were like lions' heads, and from their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur. A third of the human race was killed by these three plagues, by the fire, the smoke, and the sulfur that came out of their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouths, in their tails, for their tails, which resemble snakes, have heads, and they inflict injury with them. What do we have? Are we looking at some kind of fantastic creatures, demonic creatures that came out of the abyss? Oh no, my friends, I believe John is witnessing modern warfare. And yes, if John were looking at a full attack, armored attack of armored vehicles from different nations, how would a man in his day describe those things? Those armored vehicles are horses in his mind. He's never seen anything mechanical at all. There was never in his day any other way to get around except by the horses. So here we are describing what he can only call horses that spit smoke and fire and sulfur out of their mouths, and they kill people. I can see it. I don't know if you can see it, but I believe this is the Apostle John describing for us the wickedness of modern warfare unleashed on humanity as we're watching it take place even now in the Middle East. And yes, the wickedness of mankind has always been demonically induced. Think about the millions that have perished at the hands of people like the caliphates of Hitler, of Stalin, Lenin, of Mao. Millions are killed in some of these things. And even to this day, in which we see rampant terrorism around the world, we saw the terror of ISIS and now the terror of Hamas. And with no seeming conscience whatsoever, they destroy. Where do you think that comes from? Well, the Bible says it comes from the God of this age. We are still being terrorized by Satan and his hordes, and will be until Jesus comes. And so it should be no surprise that the very weapons of modern warfare, controlled by people who are controlled by demons, would be used to terrorize all of humanity before Jesus comes back. We've seen it as a pattern, and yes, for the historical analyst or even the idealist who looks at Revelation, yes, this is a pattern that's been through history, but it comes to a crescendo in these days before Jesus returns. And it will be so bad that once again we see this comment that's been over and over since the trumpet blasts started: a third, a third, a third. It's something that's been handed to John explicitly during this heavenly vision, that it's going to be so bad that up unto a third of the remaining population on the earth will die because of this terror. Well, as this is going on, remember, it's also a promise being fulfilled. Yes, there may be up to a third that die, but remember, Jesus said unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. All the buttons would be pushed, the nuclear weapons would be unleashed, and what's left of planet Earth would be uninhabitable if the demons have their way. The promise, my friend, is that this does not last forever, but that Jesus is going to return. Now, as he's promised that return, he's also said in his word so many things that are going to happen before the day in which he returns to establish his kingdom on planet Earth. And a lot of that has to do with these wars that are going on right now. And yes, it looks like the Ezekiel war in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 might be on our doorstep, as those nations seem to be lining up in attacking Israel. Will they stop? Well, Benjamin Netanyahu has said, we're not going to stop. War has been declared on us. We've been attacked. Even as I'm speaking this morning, Hezbollah is firing rockets into Israel. Even Hamas continues to fire rockets at Israelis and continues to wage war against Israel, even as they seem to be falling left and right in Gaza. The war is waging, and those who have supported and made this possible, supported these terrorists, primarily from Iran, but from other nations as well, are all wringing their hands and infuriated that their proxies can't do more to defeat Israel. Will they now finally say, okay, we've got to step in. We can't let Hamas be completely destroyed, Hezbollah be completely destroyed. Maybe we're going to step in. And when Erdogan in Turkey, who, by the way, is an Islamist, Erdogan perhaps sees himself as a candidate for that final Mahdi in the eschatology of Islam. He sees himself as perhaps the person that's going to step up and unite Islamic countries against Israel, and has proposed already verbally since October 7th that these nations should come together and declare war on Israel. What's going to be happening in these coming days? Well, friends, as you see this unfold, don't be afraid. The reason God gave you these prophecies in advance was to let you know that when it seems like terror is in control of this earth, it's not going to be forever. It will be shortened. It will be stopped by the return of the Prince of Peace. And friends, we won't have peace until he shows back up. So in the meantime, keep your hope alive. Keep looking up, Share the gospel of the good news with everyone you can. And remember, Jesus ultimately is coming to solve all this mess. You have a great day in the Lord. I'll see you again right here tomorrow as we wake up in His Word.